Hi everybody, welcome back to today's episode. We have Thomas from the Bank Engine. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to join the podcast.
We've been engaged with each other for a while, and I think you're one of the kind of I'd say one of the better UK pages of with how you make extra money on top of your job, side hustles, and you kind of spread in financial education. So, and I think one of the first ever posts we did together was about what topics should be taught in school about money, right? And that there's kind of a lack of financial education in the UK, especially. So, why do you think that there is that lack of education, and is that kind of the motivation behind you starting that page?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was quite a long time ago now that we did that post, but fond memories. So I think generally there is a huge lack of financial education in the UK, and experiencing that firsthand, everything that I know today was self-taught. I think that obviously a lot of it has got to do with the curriculum, but equally I think that because teachers weren't taught themselves about finances and aren't particularly experts, there's also a lot of information that they feel uncomfortable distributing to people, whether it's in schools, colleges, universities. I think that there's obviously quite a wide education gap, and that's from early years all the way through to people who are pensioners now that were just never given the information. So I think that really is kind of my key aim, is to kind of bridge that gap for everyone and bring financial education to as many people as possible.
Yeah, and I think you're one of the things that makes it unique is you kind of give specific numbers as well. For example, like with the post saying like you've made extra income on top of your job. So what are kind of are there a few side hustles you could recommend to people if who are maybe looking to make a little bit extra income on top of their job?
Sorry, I think you just dropped out there.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Um, so on top of your uh kind of your job, you're making a small amount of money from side hustles and like I think match betting, bank switching, and obviously your page as well. Are there some easy side hustles maybe you could recommend to people who want to make a bit extra money?
yeah, absolutely. So I think that's kind of one of the key things that kind of differentiates me to all the other pages, is that as well as ensuring that everyone has the education that they need, is also kind of helping people increase their income. Because one of the things that I feel is really valuable is you can cut as many costs as you like, but you're going to end up at the bare minimum that you can no longer cut any costs. Whereas there's an infinite amount of income that can be achieved, in essence, depending on what side hustles you want. And over the last few years, I've been exploring a lot of different side hustle options and kind of seeing whether they're worth doing, whether they're not. The one that you mentioned there that I found particularly lucrative is match betting. Obviously, you've got the standard, just be aware that you are using gambling sites, and you should proceed with a bit of caution. But that one particularly looks at mathematical kind of calculations and how you can use that to beat the bookmakers at their own game and create a profit in the process. So I've been doing that one for a few years now. One that I started more recently, which I quite enjoy, is an actual IRL side hustle, if you like, which is mystery shopping. And kind of in that, you go out to these various stores, complete some tasks, and you get paid for it in the process. Often you also can end up with some free goodies as well. So you can end up with free pints at pubs, free shopping from supermarkets, free tech from tech companies as well. So that one's quite good if you are a bit more extroverted. Personally, I wouldn't call myself an extrovert, but I think that by throwing myself into the deep end with that one, it's helped me become a lot more comfortable with kind of engaging with people out in kind of the real world in peculiar circumstances, should we say. So those are the two kind of main ones at the minute. And then obviously the page is a side hustle in itself, but it's quite a lot of work. So kind of building it up, as I'm sure you know, with building your page.
Yeah. What's what's kind of I know we mentioned about kind of the financial education aspect of running the page. What else do you have kind of planned? Are you working on guides, and how do you see kind of like the future of your content as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started the page, initially it was just a website, and I suddenly realized I had no idea how to drive traffic to a website. So I kind of built an Instagram page just kind of to tell people that the website existed, and it's grown from there, from strength to strength, really. Just kind of looking at more kind of in-depth topics on the page, and then equally just sharing my own experiences. So I think that the plan is to continue exactly what I'm doing now with the page, but I want to grow TheBankEngine as a brand more, which will obviously include a few more guides, which I want to do, which are just obviously free guides. So I've got the one on investing at the minute, which has helped hundreds of people start their investing journeys, just kind of talking through the basics and how I started and my journey as well. And then I think long term, the plan is obviously to take this on full time and kind of help at the source with the education. So whether that's going into schools, workplaces, universities, helping everyone kind of know the bare bones of finances, whether that's tax, mortgages, how to save a little bit of extra cash, just everything that's missing really. So I think there's a big goal. It's just kind of getting there slowly and building up the audience and making sure that I'm taking it one step at a time and not rushing into anything is the key point at the minute.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. And when it comes to investing, obviously, like a lot of like online pages, we encourage people to start investing, but there's a
Yes.
lot of risks that come with it, and some people would say that, like for example, I think there's a lot of mainstream financial maybe creators that stay away from the topic of investing because they don't want to be held liable or anything like that. So do you think investing is kind of one of the better ways to build wealth, and what would you say are kind of the big risks that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, with everything that I say, it's not financial advice, of course, but I was kind of very new to investing a few years ago, just before COVID. I had no idea it existed really, other than for those that were very wealthiest in the country. And I think that after spending hundreds of hours just kind of reading up on the benefits of it and how it can actually help in terms of building wealth over the long term, it is really the only surefire way to grow wealth. And that's exactly why every single workplace pension, every single private pension is invested in some form of another. So I think having some exposure to it is really important, whether that is just your workplace pension or whether that's actually starting a stocks and shares ISA of your own general investment account. Even if you're putting in £5 a month, it's better than nothing. And I think it's just kind of getting out of your comfort zone a little bit, because obviously with investing, there is a chance that you will lose some of your money, but you've really got to kind of look at the risks and decide whether they outweigh the rewards for you personally, because everyone's got a different risk appetite and everyone's going to be investing for something different. So if you're investing to make 100% in a year, you're obviously in it for the wrong reasons. But if it's to help you have a better life in 10, 20, 30 years, I think it's definitely worth looking at. But also just take out all those risk questionnaires that everyone gives you when you sign up to an investment platform at the start, and just kind of see what they suggest as well. I think is one of the main things that I always recommend, just because then you're actually doing it for the right reasons. I don't know if that's something you kind of agree with on that part.
Yeah, 100%. I think understanding your risk tolerance and your goal as well, in terms of, yeah, like what your long-term vision is, whether you're like investing for, if you want to retire in 10, 20 years time. Maybe if you're a bit younger, you could be a bit more comfortable with taking on maybe risk, whether it's an asset which is higher reward potentially, such as like crypto. Maybe I think crypto is quite volatile. So I think it shouldn't be a huge percentage of your portfolio, but maybe like a younger person might be more comfortable. So how can people kind of diversify their assets? And a lot of people, for example, might go into index funds if they want to kind of diversify in stocks. Do you think that's the safest way to kind of spread your money?
Yeah, I think as a beginner, index funds are always the best way to do it. And whether that's through picking your own index funds through a platform like Vanguard, or whether you want to use kind of one of these robo advisors that picks them for you, like Nutmeg Wealthify, I think anything that makes you feel more comfortable with what you're doing is the right option. And as you progress, you can obviously start to diversify a bit further, whether that's outside of stocks and index funds. So, for example, when I first started, I just opened up a standard stocks and shares ISA with Nutmeg, put in a bit each month and saw how it went, and learned along the way. And now I'm kind of investing. I've got a little bit in crypto, a little bit in kind of private companies through crowd funds, and then obviously looking at commodities and stuff as well, going forwards. But yeah, I think it's just kind of what you want to do, because there's no necessity to over diversify it, and there's no necessity to get into anything you're uncomfortable with. Especially, I know there's a lot of kind of umming and ahhing around the crypto space, particularly after the last kind of year and what a bumpy ride it's been. But I do agree with you, for some people it could well be worth having a tiny little sliver of your portfolio allocated to it. I'm assuming you've still got a crypto allocation as well in your portfolio to kind of diversify a bit further.
Yeah, I've got a small amount, mostly in Bitcoin and Ethereum, but it's only about, say, less than 10% of my total, compared to my stock portfolio.
Yeah, pretty much identical to me. The bulk of it in Ethereum and Bitcoin, and I think it's about 5% of my total portfolio at the minute. So yeah, pretty tidy at the minute.
Yeah, we've it's been doing quite well so far this year as well, and I think those people who kept buying on the way down have already kind of seen a bit of a reward, whereas there's a lot of people who I've spoken to who maybe panic sold or bought right at the top and then never bought again. So do you think there's mistakes that maybe people who are new to investing are maybe chasing? A lot of people seem to be chasing hype, especially like the fear of missing out in crypto because of the kind of the promise of super high returns, but it doesn't always work out as fast as you might hope, right?
I think that's exactly right. And I think that's following in from kind of COVID times. I remember when kind of Tesla was the big deal and everyone was kind of trying to jump into that. And then moving into kind of the AMC, kind of GameStop stocks as well, I think is kind of gamified investing a little bit, which is quite dangerous. But I think as long as people do their due diligence and everything, it's just kind of sensible to see what's out there and see what works for you, particularly with crypto and kind of more meme stocks, if you like. So, yeah, I think that's the key point.
Yeah. I think we both recently as well. We did a post about our money mistakes, and I think there's there's quite a few things. I think young people tend to kind of fall into a few traps with things like not investing soon enough, maybe because obviously investing at a young age has an amazing benefit down the line. Other things like I think setting like unrealistic targets and trying to impress others as well, I think is a trap, like, or a mistake that a lot of people, including myself, have made. So, what do you think there are like a couple of financial habits and good practices that young people should and can implement to kind of improve their situation?
Yeah, I think so. I think kind of when you initially get that first job, or when you initially have a bit of kind of control over your money, usually guessing that's around 15, 16 for most people, I think just kind of reading up on what kind of works for money is important, and understanding how it works for you is really key. So I'll admit that when I was younger, I didn't even consider the fact that I wouldn't keep the entire salary that was listed on a job. And then I became an accountant, and sadly, quite a lot of it disappears. But it's just kind of really just getting the gist of how money works, whether you are tracking it properly. So if you've got a little weekend job, kind of keep an eye on how much you're making each week. If it fluctuates a bit, you obviously need to keep an eye on your spending. I mean, you don't necessarily need to save all your money whilst you're younger, because you've got to live a little bit, but having kind of a savings account that you transfer, I don't know, £5-10 a week to, or even less than that, is the benefit, whether it's rounding up your spending or something like that. I think just kind of instilling those habits from a younger age will make you more kind of in tune to do it at a later age, and it kind of makes sure that you've got kind of that better understanding of it. Similarly, I think just kind of talking about money with other people is really beneficial. I know that often in the UK it's just frowned upon, but whether you're at work and you just want to speak to your boss or get like a bit of a better idea of how they built their business, or what they do, or what their career looked like leading up to the point they're at, I think there's a lot of lessons that could be learned. And just having that openness from a young age will give you better opportunities in the future to kind of negotiate wages, look at what career paths are best for you, and how you can actually build something that you might want to in the future.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything different you would suggest for those kind of young age group.
No, I think that's all really good. And I think, like you mentioned, that sometimes I think like money conversations are frowned upon. I think it's still a bit of a touchy subject, and as well, like you see on social media, when you have like a really top performing post that reaches a lot of people, you can get those comments which of people taking it maybe in the wrong way. When I think obviously we started to create content for educational purposes, but sometimes maybe people who have made mistakes in the past, or maybe they see the post and think that you're trying to, show off or talk down to them. Do you see much of that, and do you think there's still like a stigma kind of about personal finance and money?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I've seen all of it as much as you have, that you can't please everyone all of the time, and I think it's just going to come with the kind of, especially with the size of your page as it's grown recently, you're going to have people kind of saying that and kind of taking it negatively. But I think without kind of putting that information out there, whilst you might be upsetting one or two people, the vast majority of people, it could actually change their lives for the better just by kind of getting better understanding of everything. Equally, just with anything that I kind of post, people are interested in understanding the full information from it, when I necessarily can't give all the information without doing a 3-4 hour lecture on the topic. So you have to naturally leave bits out and kind of elaborate on things later down the line. And I think a lot of that can cause a bit of backlash, because it looks like you're skimming over a topic that really needs in-depth education, but kind of the nature of social media doesn't allow you to do that. So you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. But I think it's one of those things that over time people will kind of get a better gist of the fact that people are more open about money. And I think it's definitely a generational thing, especially the people that I kind of speak to. Younger people quite open to talk about anything finance related, but when you start speaking to the older generation, they kind of like to keep it all kind of private and don't necessarily want to discuss it in depth, and think that it's kind of rude to discuss it. I don't know if that's something that you kind of can correlate with.
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe because there's a lot more financial creators now than there ever has been. So it's almost, especially like on YouTube now, there's a lot of investing channels, and it's become a lot more popular with the younger people, whereas maybe it wasn't before. So I think maybe with the younger generation, they're kind of they're getting a bit more exposure thanks to the internet than maybe they would have with before, with kind of the lack of education in schools.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I think it's only for the better, really, and I think hopefully it's gonna becoming more mainstream over the next few years, even more so than it is now.
Yeah. What do you think about using credit cards, and do you think that they are dangerous, or when managed correctly, do you think they are a good tool? I think they are. Yeah, can we? I think there's obviously pros and cons, but what do you think? Kind of the basics about credit cards.
Yeah, so this is one of the ones that I get two sides of the argument on every time I discuss. So it's an interesting one. From my point of view, I took out my first credit card when I was 18, and that was after I'd done enough research about it to understand what I was doing. I use my credit card for my purchases every month, and then I pay it off at the end of every month in full, and that works perfectly for me because it gives me good cash flow, and I can just see that payment go in one go. Also, I can collect rewards on the spending, and all my spending is protected in some way or another through the kind of credit card guarantees that are out there. I can see why people can find them dangerous, and I know that a lot of people have kind of had their lives fall apart by using credit cards. And I think a lot of that is to do with the lack of education, and whether that stems from the point in schools that credit cards weren't discussed, or whether that comes from the failure of the credit card companies when you're taking out the credit cards to kind of inform you of what you're actually doing. And it can be a really dangerous trap to see, oh, that minimum payment is so much lower than the full payment, so I'll just make that, not knowing that that's going to then snowball into a disaster that could actually really impact your life negatively. So I think personally, I love credit cards and I'll continue to use them until they don't work for me. But I think, again, it's just a lot of research just needs to be done before you take them out, whether you actually need one, whether you'll be able to get one, because I know a lot of people will just apply for a credit card blindly as well and get declined, and then their credit score goes down, so they apply for another one, get declined, so credit score goes down again, and it can cause more problems like that as well. Or whether it is just a case of kind of increasing education all round on it, from the credit cards, from schools, from financial kind of influences as well. I think that will be the key point. I don't know if you kind of sit on the same side of the fence.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I think, like we said, there's dangers to be aware of. But obviously, with anything, always do your research and know what kind of the risks are before. So are there any kind of tips you have on maybe people who can improve their credit score? And then like easy things people can do to kind of to manage that credit.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of kind of, if you want to improve your credit score, everyone kind of thinks, oh, I'm going to have a perfect credit score because I've never had any debt. But actually, that's not what the kind of credit agencies want to see. They want to see that you have had debt before and can manage it effectively. So I would suggest, if you are comfortable with taking out a credit card, if you could take one out as early as you can, whether that's just a credit card with a really small limit. You've got these cards called credit builder cards, which are quite useful, and just put one transaction on it a month and have a direct debit set up. What that'll do is it will have a low credit utilization, which means that, say you've got a £250 limit on your credit card and you're just putting a tank of petrol in your car a month, so 50 odd pound, say, you're only using 20% of the card limit. So that looks better rather than, I've got £250, let me put £250 on it, and then we'll do that month after month after month. It's showing the credit agencies that you can actually have this much available to you, but control yourself enough to not use all of it. And that's a really good indicator that will improve your credit score. And then equally, by setting up that direct debit, you're paying it off every month. So you're not having a running balance. And again, that looks really good to them because you've borrowed the money from them, even if it's just for a month, because it is effectively borrowing money. And then you're paying it off as soon as they want you to. So that looks really good as well. Equally, on the kind of more riskier end that not many people might want to plunge into is that mutualization of credit cards is really valuable. So if you've got a higher limit, the amount that you use will be a lower percentage if it stays the same. So what I did is I found this out and I immediately opened a second credit card with no intention of increasing the amount that I spent on credit cards every month. But instantly that doubled my credit allowance each month. And then the amount that I'm using overall is a lower percentage, which looked more beneficial to the credit agencies as well. And then again, I mean, it's just kind of being cautious of how many applications you're doing, whether that's credit cards, whether that's overdrafts, new current accounts, or personal loans. That will impact your credit score as well. So I think just being cautious of that. One of the things that I get a lot of comments about is bank switching, which I obviously do to take full advantage of the kind of bank switching incentives. And then often I'll stay with the bank for a while as well and just use the account. If I like it, I'll stay. If I don't, I'll switch it out again and make more money off of it. But when you do apply for lots of banks over and over, that'll impact your credit score as well. So it doesn't necessarily matter too much in the grand scheme of things. But if you are looking to kind of buy a house in the next 6 months, you don't want to be opening 6 current accounts, 2 credit cards, 1 personal loan, and kind of ruining your credit score just for the sake of those extra credit card reward points or the bank switching bonuses, that kind of thing. But those are kind of the key points that I've always focused on, but I'm sure there are lots of other kind of little bits as well that I've missed.
No, yeah, that's good. All really good info. I wanted to touch on as well, I think that you've mentioned about how you're planning to kind of reach your first million and like retire early as well. How's your, like, do you have a set age and a goal that you're aiming for, and how are you planning to do that? Obviously you're investing and working on side hustles and increasing your income, but yeah, how are you planning to achieve the kind of the main goal of like financial independence?
So it's a very ambitious goal, but I like ambition. So I'm currently 23 and aiming to reach £1 million in net worth by the age of 30, so 7 years. I'm not quite at the first 100,000 yet, but once I get to that 100k net worth, it should begin to snowball quite nicely from there. The main things that I'm kind of focusing on to get there is that investment pot, which is being increased by increasing my side hustles, which increases the amount I can invest each month. Obviously, compound interest is going to do a lot of the work, but in 7 years, it's not going to do an awful lot. So the other sides that I'm then looking at are building businesses, which I will then either be able to sell in the future or extract value from it. So the first business is obviously TheBankEngine. And then from there, I'm going to potentially look at starting other businesses in the future as well. But so far we're looking pretty good, and it's on track, but it's still a lot of work to do.
It's an amazing goal to aim for. Do you think it's important for everyone to have like a financial plan and like a long-term financial goal in place, and like a kind of, you can then like break that down into smaller achievable goals almost, right?
Yeah, I think so. So I think kind of the way that I'm looking at that £1 million is using the rule of 4%, which obviously, assuming the stock market grows as it has historically, you can take out 4% of your capital without it reducing overall. So I'd still have £1 million plus a bit of interest sat there whilst I'm taking out 4% per year. So that would then allow me £40,000 per year of income, if you like, which obviously wouldn't be taxed if it was in investments. But that's obviously the longer term goal in a stock and stocks and shares ISA. but we're looking at £1 million net worth for a minute. But I think really kind of looking at that, kind of, I think you also call it like a FIRE number, so financially independent, retire early, and knowing how much you want as a kind of net worth or in a portfolio, to then look at how that can kind of guide your life going forwards. So say you wanted to live quite a frugal lifestyle but retire early, and you only need, say, £20,000 a year to kind of live your life as a couple, and then kind of look at that, work backwards, and then see what you need to do from now to get there. And then you might see that actually you don't need to do as much work as you thought over the next kind of few years, decades, whatever it is, to get there. I think that kind of helps people kind of mold their lives now to help them get the lives that they want later on.
Yeah, and I think it's super important to have goals in place. So I think a lot of people, unfortunately, like with the kind of the cost of living crisis, maybe it's become a lot more difficult with how expensive things are becoming in the UK, for example, like to invest the difference. But I think even just implementing like the basics and the good financial habits and practices can help make a bit of a difference, even if it's like finding a new way to save money, or cutting back, like using a budget to cut back on unnecessary spending. So do you think there's kind of a few things that people can help people in their situation, given that kind of the cost of living crisis?
Yeah, most definitely. So obviously before this crisis, everyone kind of used the same spiel that they always have done, which is switch energy providers and then cut out your coffees and everything that works before. But with how much prices have just skyrocketed for pretty much everything over the last kind of few years, it's just not possible anymore. So I think from my obviously personal perspective, I always say you might save a few pounds by cutting your costs, but you're going to spend hours figuring out how to do it. Whereas if you can actually spend those few hours online, whether that's kind of looking at creating a product, whether that's looking at a side hustle, or just kind of building your kind of knowledge of investing, saving, personal finance, I think that could be a better use of your time. Generally, but obviously not everyone can do that. You might have small kids at home, you might be working double shifts, you might be doing everything that you possibly can and still not being able to make ends meet. So for those people, I think it's a really difficult situation, because it's difficult to understand kind of where you can cut back when you've already cut back everything that you can. And a lot of people are obviously saying, oh, you need to cut back on the Netflix subscriptions, the Disney subscriptions and stuff like that. But personally, when I think that's what's probably getting a lot of people through these tough times is that kind of entertainment section, and it's £10 a month, that probably isn't worth cutting back on. And you might want to look at other things. So whether that's moving to different supermarkets, so saying switching from Sainsbury's to Aldi or something like that, whether it's fully taking advantage of all these cashback sites that are available, so where you can get automated cashback nowadays through lots of different apps at the same time. I think that could be really interesting to kind of add that to your kind of roster of, when we go shopping, let's check that we're going to a new store that's got better deals, let's check that we're getting cash back on it, and then let's also see if there's any vouchers. That kind of thing is always worth doing, and that can really add up over a month, because obviously groceries are one of those things that we spend a lot of money on, but we don't really think about comparing them that often. So I think that's really key. And kind of, I think that's really it, to be honest, because so much of the other costs are kind of stuck where they are. You can't really go to the council and say, oh, I don't really want to pay that much council tax. You can't go to an energy provider and switch because they're all charging the same. Your phone provider is probably not going to give you a better deal just because you want one. So it's that really tricky kind of middle ground at the minute where there's not much that you can do. You can either really cut back and see if you can cut back some more, or if you can try and increase that income a little bit, even if it's like an extra £5 a month. I know a lot of people do surveys whilst they're watching TV or looking after their kids. I know that doesn't pay much per hour, but if it's something you can do whilst being on there with your kids, that's quite a good little side hustle to have. Or to be honest, switching banks is a real big help at the minute if your credit score doesn't matter too much for a second. Adding an extra £200 per switch is huge, especially if both you and your partner can do it. That could be a real game changer over the course of a month. So it's really difficult, isn't it? I don't know if there's anything that you've kind of thought of that could help, but I know looking at our kind of costs, I've really struggled to find anywhere that can be lowered at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's very hard. I think we mentioned it before about there's only so much you can cut back. But even those like side hustles you mentioned can help increase your income, which is maybe easier to kind of scale your income at the moment than it is to find anywhere to save money with everything. So yeah, I think that's all really good advice. If someone was going to invest 10k right now, how would you say to kind of split the money? And would you say that you're more towards kind of dollar cost averaging it, or more lump sum if it was a kind of a 10k investment?
So I've often thought about this myself before, and originally I used to think it's just worth lumping it all in and just go with it. But I think after how up and down the stock market's been over the last few years, I think dollar cost averaging has got to be the way to do it. What I would probably do is put in a slightly larger amount at the start, say maybe 25% of it, just so you've got that good kind of grounded place. And then if the prices do continue to rise, at least you've got a decent amount at that lower price. But I really do think kind of that monthly amount, it builds a good habit of you actually investing monthly as well beyond that 10k. You're seeing it kind of moving each month, and you're getting a better kind of understanding of, when the stock market goes down, I end up in a better position. When it goes up, I end up in a better position, but now the amount I've just put in this month obviously cost me a bit more. So I think that's kind of what you're going to gain from it, is kind of that experience and habits, as well as I do tend to think that it would get a bit of a better result at the minute. But obviously no one can predict the markets, and if I could, that'd be brilliant. But yeah, I don't know what kind of option you've always considered, or whether that's changed recently.
I think I think I'm similar to you. I think I would recommend DCA at the moment. I think just because there is always the danger that you put in your money now and then maybe the stock market has like a bad performance for the next 3-4 years, and then you've made no progress. But if you're able to kind of buy on those dips and bring your average down, then it will kind of even out across the long run. So yeah.
Yeah, I think because I obviously started first investing just before COVID, and I put that first amount in, and then pretty much overnight it all dropped by about 20%. And I was like, oh, well, at least I didn't put in even more than I did. So I think that's clearly still ingrained in my memory. But it's a learning experience.
Yeah, I think everyone, as a new investor, like there's lots of mistakes like I made as well. But like as long as you kind of learn and you're always doing your research and you're comfortable like to invest money which isn't going to change your life if it drops, I think that's the most important thing. Because I think maybe with new investors, they maybe check in their portfolio too often in the fear that it will drop, and then once it drops, they start to kind of starts to play on their mind like, oh, am I going to lose everything? But yeah. I think that's the wrong mindset, because asset prices, stock prices, crypto can change very quickly. But actually, when it goes down, is almost like a better time to buy, right? So I think having the mindset of yeah, don't check stock prices every single day. You don't need to see what the market's doing every single day. I think that's one of the biggest things I can say to new investors.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that was my main issue when I first started as well, was I just had the app on my phone and I was looking every day. I was like, oh, it's gone up, it's gone down. Oh, it just seems to not really be doing what I want it to do each time I look. And then you kind of take a step back and you think, am I actually going to want this cash in the next 5-10 years? And if the answer is no, it really isn't worth looking at what's going on. And if you do actually need it in the next 5-10 years, it probably shouldn't be invested if you're having to check it that often to kind of have that worry going back through your head as well, I think. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think we've been going for 40 minutes. Do you think we should anything else you wanted to cover quickly, or do you think we've covered quite a few things today?
I think that's probably everything that I can think of for today, but unless there's anything else that you think was particularly useful to go over.
I think we've covered a broad range.
Absolutely.
So, where can people find out about the bank engine?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main page that you'll probably want to have a look at is our Instagram page, which is at TheBankEngine, and we post there regularly a few times a week. And then you can also check out the website as well, which is TheBankEngine.com, and that's got even more information that we can't fit into any Instagram posts.
Brilliant. Well, appreciate the time today. Thanks very much, and yeah.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.